everybody, I'm Tom Vessel.
I'm Joy Evans.
And I'm Mike DeLisio.
Today we're taking a look at a game, Dead Cells, the roguelite board game. This is the second roguelite board game to come out this year.
Which is crazy. It's a renaissance, as some would say.
So actually the very first one, the
Slay the Spire.
Slay the Spire, came out to great success and really copied the game. When this one was announced, I had never even heard of the game. And so I immediately went, downloaded it, and played it for a while. And it is a side-scrolling, shoot-'em-up style game. There's some sort of theme in there where you were killed and now you're coming back to life, something like that.
Yeah, beheaded, I don't know.
You just run through and shoot a lot of stuff, then you die, you will eventually die, and then you slowly unlock weapons and you will get better. It's actually, from my opinion on the video game, it's a pretty slow progression, I found.
Yes.
Like, I am inching along. Have you played it?
I did. I played with it, and I gave up pretty quickly.
It's pretty hard.
It is. It's really hard.
What did you play it on?
Switch.
See, I played it on my phone at first, and you cannot play a side-scroller on your phone.
I cannot imagine doing it on your phone.
So, Mike, you have not played it.
I have. I played it a bunch, Tom. I did the same thing that you did. I had never heard of the game. After playing the board game, I'm like, all right, let me check this video game out. I played it on my phone. I'm still playing it. I'm a little obsessed with it, to be honest with you. It is hard on the phone. It probably is something I'll eventually just get on the Switch and do, but I'm enjoying it on the phone for now. The question is, how well does this board game bring the feel of that video game? So maybe I should show everyone how it plays and see how well it does. All right, so since Dead Cells is not a typical board game, this is not going to be a typical overview. I'm just going to give you some high-level ideas. There are certain things you wouldn't want to spoil, but I just want to give you a general idea on how this game works. So in looking at the different areas that you have that you'll interact with, at the top you've got what's called a mutation board, and that really is going to be all of the items that are going to affect you on your upcoming run. So you've got some things that might happen at the start of the game, things that may occur during the game, and things that may happen during the inter-biome period, which is if you make it through an entire biome, you'll have a chance to do things like heal, buy things along those lines. Then below that, you've got what's called the annex and the combat boards, and these are going to be where you would set up for your particular biome. You always are going to start every run in the prisoner's quarters. And so you've got the creature cards and the advanced creature cards. You've got the blueprints and the items that would be found in this area. And down here is where you would have combat play out on any combat that you would encounter throughout the game. Down here at the very bottom, you've got the biome that is going to be specific for where you are in the game. At the beginning, as I said, every run is going to go through the prisoner's quarters. A run is essentially going as far as you can until you die. And you have to expect that in this game, that's going to happen. Dying is not necessarily the end of the game. Runs could last as short as 10 minutes. They can go as long as hours, just depending upon where you are at in the progression of your party, all right? And so the way things are going to work out is that everyone's going to choose one of the Beheaded, which are the different characters. In this case, you're seeing the Quartered. They all have their own unique player boards, and they all have a nice reference sheet that goes along with those characters. I do want to point out that what you're seeing here is the deluxe edition of the game, and so your mileage may vary as far as the particular the quality or the type of the components that you see. All right. And so as everyone starts in the prisoner's quarters, I'll just kind of show that a little bit. What you're going to be doing in a run is you're going to be moving your party through a biome, and you're going to go through particular encounters. You might have something where you just come across some equipment and you flip it over and you get access to whatever that equipment is. You are also likely going to encounter some combat, which you'll be able to tell because you can see, hey, there's a monster right there. I got to fight somebody. Some of these are doors where you don't exactly know what's going to be on the other side. Maybe it's a fight, maybe it's some treasure, maybe it's something else. You just don't know. All right. And so you'll go through a run until you either make it to the end of that biome. In this case, you're most likely going to be getting to the toxic sewers. You would need a rune to get to the ramparts, or you die. And if you were to die, say at this place, you would go right back to the beginning. You'd kind of reseed the board because you don't, every tile is not being represented out here. They're random ones that you place out, and you'd go again. If you get through the end of a biome, then you would go to the interbiome portion of the game, which I talked about right up there, where you'd be able to heal, buy some equipment, and also spend the things you might find on a run, like gold teeth or cells, on cards that you could then use to upgrade your game. Okay? So, really quickly, I feel like I just want to explain how combat works, and that should do enough to get us started, okay? So, this little area represents your party. Over here is where you'd be placing any of the baddies, and maybe here, which would mean that they are actually behind you and they would act before you do. But let's say that we had gone here, we'd gotten our little bit of equipment, then we come up here and we were facing our first combat, all right? We flip it over and it's going to tell us a couple of things. Well, right up at the top, it's telling us that whoever was the first player would pass that clockwise to the next beheaded. It says we have 2 regular enemies, and the hand refers to a looting action. So in this case, if one of the beheadeds is able to loot, they would loot a blueprint, okay? So what you do is you would just take the cards from the deck here, because these are the regular baddies, the elite ones have the star, and you would find out a couple of things. Number one, this is telling you, hey, you're fighting a zombie. It has a health of 2. It also is going to tell you what's going to happen in the different phases of combat. It's saying that in the first and the second phase of combat, they're going to attack for 1. They won't do anything in the third phase, and if they make it to the fourth phase, they're going to do a damage. Also, it tells you what happens if you defeat them. In this case, you'd get a gold tooth. You place it on the leftmost open spot unless it tells you otherwise. The next one here, hey, we've got a grenadier. All right, pop him right there. Now, as I said, there are some creatures that will tell you they go into a specific spot. So this undead archer, if this had flipped over first, it would have gone into the furthest most spot because it's trying to hit you from afar. But we're not facing any elite baddies right here. Then every player would have a deck of cards that are specific to their character. They would draw a number of them, and then they would choose which cards they're going to be playing in the combat, okay, in the 3 phases of combat. And so you can tell the other players on your team a general idea of what you're doing. Maybe you would say, hey, I'm really not doing anything except for the second phase where I would do 2 damage, all right? So you could tell them something like that. And then everyone would flip over their active card for that phase. So in the first phase, this character's not doing anything, but maybe the other characters are doing damage in the first round. So maybe they're able to do 2 damage, and they take out this baddie right here, which would give them a gold tooth right away. So they'd pop a gold tooth right over here. Maybe this player, the second player, is only able to do 1 damage. Well, that's not good enough. This would move down. Actually, they would have had a shield put on them in the first round. And we go to the second round, which means that the first one would get damage there. Now, I had showed you a card where I'm doing 2 damage in the second round, so I'd have to knock 1 off there, and then they'd be hit for 1. And then let's assume that the next player is able to do that last bit of damage, so we would get a cell that we'd pop up there. All right? Just as a quick example, so you play through the 3 different phases of combat. You might have something like this, which is specifically referring to your board, all right, to the tactics part of your board, and that's going to be different for each different character. And as you have a chance to progress these and get more, these are cumulative, so you would get this action and that action every time you did that tactics. It might have a looting, right, which I showed you earlier. On this particular one, if you were able to loot, you would get a blueprint. Things along those lines, okay? If your party survives, then you continue forward. As I said, either until you die and have to reset the run, or until you get to an inner biome portion. When you get to an inner biome portion of the game, that's where you're able to heal, buy things, potentially spend your cells to get new cards. So for example, like in this tactics deck, you would spend 2 cells and you would get the bottom card and you would resolve it. Maybe it's a new combat card that you can give to any one of the beheaded. Maybe it's a item. Maybe it's something that goes up in the mutation board and affects every future run until you reset the whole game. So that gives you a general idea on how the game plays. Let's head back and let you know what we think.
First of all, production-wise, I'm pretty happy with this.
Oh, yeah.
But I got to say something here. I feel like if you're watching this review, you might want to buy the deluxe version for the simple, dumb reason that the deluxe version comes with boxes, and when you go to a new level, you pull out that box and everything's in there. It's a lot easier than hunting everything down. But the boxes don't, a couple of the boxes don't hold all the pieces properly, and this is something where the company was like, well, you can do it if you Jenga them in, and it's people online are not particularly pleased about that. There's also some major mess-ups in the rules where they actually had to send 2 whole sheets of rules in with the game. So I think the production's good, but there's a few mistakes.
Yeah, I agree on both counts. Number one, that I think the deluxe version, if this is a game that you plan on, playing through multiple times, which by its very design, you kind of have to get any sense of what the game offers, then investing a bit more in that deluxe edition just for ease of setup, which is something that I think some people will have an issue with. I'm sure we'll talk about that more here, kind of what's involved from moving from one run to the next, which involves getting more of those boxes. Having that storage solution makes it a little bit easier to do that. And I also agree that some of the boxes are much more tightly packed, and you really do have to spend more time than you should have to get all the pieces necessary in those boxes.
Right. I feel bad because I think they tried to make it quick to come out, but they missed the mark several areas there.
But it looks great. There is a good chunk of setup time. It's a weird game in that if I'm teaching people the rules, I can get people up and running probably in 10 minutes.
Yeah.
But battling through those rules on my own and saying, oh, I need to put this deck here and this deck here, and you put these cards here and this goes here, but because later on all this stuff's going to mix.
Right.
As time goes by, as you go through, you'll get more cards added to the decks. I just set up as a bit of a bear, although it's pretty easy to continue. My only real complaint about setup is that if you quickly run through one, you're like, I just pulled everything out of this box. Got to pack it all back in the box, get out the next box and set everything up. In the video game, there's a really short loading screen.
That's the thing. That's the biggest disconnect, I think, in a lot of these rogue games. It's like, man, I can just click a button and play it back. Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you that what I've taken to do is that, the first biome, which is the prisoners area there, I don't really pack that stuff away because I know I'm going to be playing through several runs. Even if I'm going beyond that biome to the next one or even the next one after that, I know that when I start again, I'm going to need that stuff. So I just kind of keep that right there off to the side. It doesn't take up that much space. I imagine as you move forward through and you get better and you get more stuff that you have, to have at the beginning of the game. So that you're running through that first biome almost without any, issue at all, that you're going to probably want to keep the first couple, 2 or 3, potentially even just out and ready to access.
And the game has a save point, and it's pretty easy to save stuff. You're putting it in a board and you're saving it. But that does mean, and you need to notice watching it, since it's emulating the video game in that regard, you're playing one game. I played this through several, and I upgraded a lot. And then when I taught you guys, I had to reset everything. So this is not a one and done. You're playing this on, until you're done. And in fact, I think this is an interesting solo experience, although I actually don't particularly like the solo variant. I prefer to two-hand and play two characters. They have this weird little solo thing that's, I forget what it is. It must be from the game somehow. I don't really know where it's from. That's okay, but I'd just rather play two characters. But I find that to be a little unwieldy also.
Yeah, the solo is called Serenade, and it utilizes both a deck that it comes with, which is very small to begin with, although you can choose to add cards to the Serenade deck if you like, and it also utilizes your discard pile, whichever character you have. So two-handing it is perfectly viable. I'm not having an issue. I'm playing through with the solo variant because I kind of wanted to see. I'm not having a huge issue, but your mileage may vary on that, of course.
You find with two-handing, you can get combat seems not easy, but easier because that limited communication between other people, you kind of know the cards you put down, which I think is a benefit. I think combat's hard enough.
Yeah, combat is very procedural. I want to talk about combat, what you all thought of it. I think it's a really interesting way to do it. I'm not loving the weird, this is the thing in all games these days, this whole, you can kind of communicate and you can say one thing. I'm like, oh my word, just let us talk. Or say we can't talk. Don't say I can say one thing on the card and then I'm like, oh, I said the second thing, but you're like, well, I also have a second thing. Now what do we say? And we just kind of look at each other, hoping one of us figures it out. Just, if I play this with other people, I'm playing open communication. If that makes it easier, I don't care.
I agree, because it's very vague on what you can say. It's like, well, I can hit him in the second round, but can you say that? Or if the distance, like the range? I don't know. That's what gets me, because you feel like you're cheating every time you over-communicate.
Yeah, honestly, I'm kind of with you, Tom. I don't really particularly care if you're doing open communication. I don't think it might make things a little easier. The way I understood the communication rules, basically like, okay, well, you can choose one of the rounds and say, hey, I'm going to attack in round 2. I can reach either of these two. I think those are within the scope of what you're, able to do. But limited communication, I think if you're going to incorporate that into your game, it has to be very, very specific. Anytime you've got kind of this loosey-goosey thing, at that point I'm like, well, just go to open communication then, because you're not really limiting things that much anyway.
And it's not like the game is easy. It's just, I'll tell you, in this aspect, it copies the video game exactly, where you're like, oh, this is pretty easy. I can beat these guys. I can beat these guys. Oh, these guys are harder. I can beat these guys. Oh, no, yeah. Boss comes by. That's exactly what happens in the video game. I'm like, I'm doing great. Then the boss comes by and kicks my butt. I felt like this game does the exact same thing.
It's one of those things if you're new to Rogue, because I'm newer to Rogue games. This one, and I think there's a couple other ones like Slay the Spire. But you think, okay, you're going to die. No, I'm not going to die. You were going to die. It's just, it's programmed in there. And then you're just going to run back, hopefully stronger.
Yeah, and I'm also relatively new, I guess. Not in the sense that I played Metrovania way back in the day, but this is a slightly different take on that. What you have to, I think, change is your approach to what a game means, if that makes sense. Most time when you sit down to play a game, it's a kind of a self-contained experience, right? We're playing over 5 rounds. We're playing first to 30 points. We're playing first to finish the cross the finish line, something like that. This doesn't have that, right? This has more of this idea of we're going to play until we feel that we're satisfied. Hey, we made it through this second biome. That feels good. We'll go as far as we can in the next one. We'll probably die in the first couple of encounters. Okay, at that point, we'll call it. You know what I mean? That's kind of how this feels to me. It's like we're going to go until we feel like we've had a session that we're happy with, because there's no real defined structure of how long you play it.
For me, I think this is So we mentioned Slay the Spire. Slay the Spire and this are different birds when translating to the board game because Slay the Spire was already sort of a card game as a video game. This is a twitch and use your reflexes to do it. And again, that's why when I played this, I actually bought a controller for my phone just so I could do it. But I'm giving this a 7. There's a lot of things I like about it. I prefer actually playing multiplayer over solo. I did both, and multiplayer was fun to talk things out with everybody and kind of work together as a team, but it also really hampers the experience because this is meant to be played a ton of times.
Right.
And it's going to be hard to get those same people, but maybe if you have some people that you live with, in your house, your family or whatever, and you're going to play with them, I think that's great. I said for the most part, production's there. It gives you the feel of the video game, though. They're obviously fans of that. I think that I haven't played it forever. I think that this is just like a video game. For me, this is the kind of game that at some point I would not play for a week or two, and then I would have a hard time going back to it. I would be like, oh, should I start over now? Which in a video game is kind of easier to do in the board game. I think it's a neat thing. I think fans of Dead Cells will likely like it. Not necessarily, because if you're just someone who likes to run and jump, this is more about strategically playing cards. They work together, but they're somewhat different. So I think it's interesting. It's a different kind of experience. There's not a win or loser. It's just go through to you. Well, you can win, I suppose, if you beat the boss. Right. But then you go on farther. It's also, just as a heads up, if you play this game and you're like me and immediately download every single DLC that costs like $2, all that DLC is not in this game. This is just the base stuff. So you might get a little bored fighting the same things over and over and over and over and over and over and over again, but it all depends on your perspective. It's fun. It's interesting. They succeed it. I just don't know that I want to play it all the time, but it's good enough. 7 for me.
I'm actually committed to 7 as well. I like several things about this, like the mutation board, be able to kind of level up. That always feels good. That gives you that endorphin rush type of thing. Combat, I think, is clever as far as like the order people go, the range, and all that. But I also don't find it as fun as I miss dice. I miss those awesome moments that can happen when you like get a roll where you should not win and you do and you're like, yes, or you lose. I miss that. The combat, I think, is good. It's got some clever things to it. I think I enjoy the exploration and the upgrading more on this, but I do enjoy it. It does feel like the game for me, so a 7 for me.
That real quick, before Mike says it, that is something interesting. You can flip the cards over and go, so that's how combat's going to go. Yeah,
right.
There's no like suspense. You're like, oh, we didn't get it. Or, oh, we got it.
That's the thing. You don't get those like cheer, like, yes, we did it moments in that type of combat.
Well, I like it quite a bit more than both of you. I'm actually giving it an 8.5. I was surprised at how much I enjoyed this game. I like it equally multiplayer and solo, honestly. And after playing more of the video game, I think that they did a really good job of, because it's always tricky to go in either direction, to go from a video game to a board game or a board game to a video game. And I think what they did was they took the soul of the game and they were able to keep that. Obviously, like you said, Tom, you're not going to be able to recreate those kind of twitchy elements that you get in the video game. But what they did was they kept the same style, the same sense of humor that I think is in the video game, the kind of the whimsy that's part of it. And I really think that the combat system is one that does start off maybe a little bit procedural and vanilla. It's like, okay, well, I've got these 3 lines. Like you said, you can usually get a pretty good sense whether you're going to be successful or not in a encounter. But as the game progresses and you get more of those blueprints and you get more of those items, that's when I think you're able to pull off more intricate and clever and kind of like wow moments in the combat. You don't get that right away, and I stipulate that. You have to kind of progress through the game enough so that you're getting some of these interesting items, and like in the video game, you're able to unlock better starting gear. That's when you really start to see this. But even right from the beginning, out of the get-go, I think it's a fun, a very kind of, it's just unique, right? It's unique in its space. And the fact is that you don't have to have a dedicated play group. I did want to mention that. That's going to be the easiest way, but you can have people come in and drop out. It is a simple enough game in structure that I think you could start people if you've been playing through and you've got some starting cards there in your kind of array, that you could bring people in and they'd be a little bit, beefed up. That's fine. It's not going to be that big of a deal. So 8.5, I really, really like this game a lot.
Well, there you go, folks. That's Dead Cells, the roguelite board game. I'm Tom Vassell.
I'm Joy Evans.
I'm Mike DeLisio.
And we've been beheaded or something.
It happens.
Hey everybody, thanks for watching this video. If you like this review or whatever you just watched, wasn't it amazing? Check out our channel, Dice Tower. We have all kinds of things. We review games, we do top 10s, we play games live. It's all about board games, but especially the people who play them. Check out Dice Tower YouTube channel.